All right, welcome back to the PCC podcast. Today we're going to be talking about why fitness always tends to feel like another thing on your plate. And this is a really common complaint, even from people who come into the program. This is something that we kind of have to always make sure we're catching early and helping people reset, because this isn't just something that you shift once and it just stays that way forever. It's kind of something that you kind of always have to be mindful of drifting towards, because prioritizing your fitness is hard, right? It is work. It is, adding something tactically to your plate. But I think you always hear about the people that feel like, oh, this is just a part of my life. Like, I don't feel like I have to try anymore. I don't feel like I have to think as much. Like, I literally had a call with a client. Who was it that I had yesterday? A client who's been working with me for a little bit over a year now. And she was saying, I just feel like I don't have to think about it as much. It's just a part of my life. And you do get there. And it doesn't have to feel like this burdensome thing if you are mindful of this reason of why it happens in the first place and how to actually solve it. So if you've ever been somebody who has felt like fitness is always just this other thing, I had someone tell me the other day, oh, I'm going to wait until I'm taking it seriously to put more time and money into it. And I was like, that's the complete opposite way to think about it, because if you wait until you're consistent, then you're always just going to be thinking of this as another thing that is hard to prioritize, right? You prioritize it first and then it becomes easier. But it kind of shows up as either you go all in and then you get burnt out from prioritizing your health and fitness, or you kind of are the opposite. You always feel like you don't have enough bandwidth to start. And so you end up procrastinating. And that's just another form of idealizing and perfectionism, of thinking some season of my life is going to be better to where I can actually start this thing. And none of that is actually true. And here's the real reason why fitness always tends to kind of drift in this direction, especially for perfectionists, for people who have really high standards for themselves in every area of life, is that fitness just doesn't work that way. We always think that okay, being fit and healthy is going to look a certain way, is going to feel a certain way. But when we do that, we're actually creating more of this problem. And so the way that I've learned to label this problem as of late is integration and internalization of identity. So I words, I guess, versus doing things for an outcome. And so when you think about why do people get into fitness? Typically, and I'm not saying this is the right way to go about it. I actually wholeheartedly disagree that this is the right way to go about it. But typically people wait until they hit some kind of negative turning point of I didn't like myself in these photos, or I hate how I feel in my clothes, or things like that. They wait until there's a turning point and then they want to change that and have a different outcome, right? Losing weight, feeling better in your clothes, being able to wear a certain pair of pants. None of that is a bad goal, but most people start in a place where they're driven to reach that goal, right? And so everything in their fitness journey is geared around, I need to lose the weight, instead of what is integration and identity, is making the habits themselves that would eventually lead to the weight loss a part of your life. These things are not mutually exclusive. I would say that it probably looks like a Venn diagram that's 90% overlapped, if we're being totally honest. But the focus is really where people get caught up. And so the demonstration that I've actually kind of thought to put together from this is, it was actually a reel, and I believe it went pretty viral. Let me just double check. I'm pretty sure it did really well because people relate to this so much. Performative wellness versus integrated habits. And so this got 20,000 views because people really relate to this. So the visual is that I'm on the couch and I'm looking at my watch, my smartwatch. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm 1,000 steps away from my goal. I'm just going to shake my arm while I'm laying on the couch to hit this step goal. And that is labeled performative wellness, right? I am performing habits of wellness so that I hit the outcome, so that I feel like I'm doing the right things. I'm doing it the right way, versus Integration, the second part of that reel, is I'm sitting at my desk and I'm stressed out. And I say to myself, I could really use a walk right now to decompress and clear my head. And so the outcome is that both people hit their step goal, right? But which one of those people is actually going to stick with these habits? Which one of these people, therefore, is going to keep the weight off? Because the person who is performing wellness for the outcome is not paying any mind to what happens after they hit the goal. Do they continue these habits after they hit the goal, or do they kind of just stop them because, okay, I got to where I wanted to go, so I don't need to do anything anymore? And then what happens? The weight comes back. Because, like, yeah, you burn a little bit of energy doing this, right? You burn a little bit of energy shaking your arm. Not as much as maybe you go out for a walk, but like it's not about the calories. It's about the fact that like it became a stress management practice for the second person and a part of who they are, how they manage stress, how they live their life, rather than something they only do for the outcome. Okay. And so when you have performative wellness at the focus, that's how you get burnt out from your health and fitness journey. That's how you sprint to the finish line and then burn out right before the end and gain all the weight back, right? The tortoise and the hare. Integrative health, integrative habits is the people who really do see the lasting behavior change. This is the same reason that there was some research out about GLP-1s and like the long-term effects of people who come off of the drugs. And like to no surprise, the research basically showed that within a year of discontinuing a GLP-1, people will gain on average 2/3 of the weight back on average. Okay. That means some people gain more than they lost back. Some people will maybe keep it off. But what do GLP-1s do? They just kill your appetite. You just stop eating. And most people don't take a GLP-1 and have coaching guidance like we have for clients at PCC, right? We're a very behavior change oriented company. And so, like, most people are not integrating habits, they're not changing their lifestyle. They're just letting the thing do the work because that's what a drug does. It does something for you in a magical way, right? And so that's why. Right? There was no integration of habits. And those people weren't even performing wellness. They were just, using the drug. And I actually don't have anything against GLP-1s, like just for caveat's sake. Like I think that if they are used appropriately with like a tandem approach, for example, I have a good handful of clients that are using GLP-1s within the program here. And I'm transparent about that when we share like transformations and stuff, like who is seeing the results with them versus without them. And when you have a tandem approach, right, there is research to show that behavior change oriented approaches do result in longer lasting weight loss outcomes, people actually keeping the weight off. And so if you do both, there is a much higher likelihood that you will keep a lot of that weight off. And that I would be willing to bet that the people who are on the lower end of that average calculation, the people who don't gain 2/3 or all of the weight back, are the ones that probably did a little bit more integration in their habits, because this information is out there, right? And a lot of people want to not only be healthy for a photo shoot or a wedding or a trip, but for life, right? And so how do we do this like mentally, right? And like this comes back to being outcome versus process focused, right? And you've probably heard about that in a lot of areas of life, leadership, work, fitness, health, etc. Outcome focused is focused on, I'm doing this for the outcome. I'm doing this so that the scale says blank. And process focused is focusing on the daily actions that actually build up to you being able to reach that goal, right? And when it comes to like not having fitness feel like another thing on your plate, or when it comes to like not burning out and actually getting to your goal, it's really tricky because like you have to have both. And this is where like I've made mistakes in my coaching journey in the past where I've like kind of tried to just toss out the outcome part of the focus, and that's also a mistake because you have to keep an eye on outcomes. And like, for example, somebody who is so process focused that we are only focused on certain nutrition habits or lifestyle habits and there's no outcome focus. You might, in that case, in the past, I have thrown out measurables, like, for example, weighing food, tracking food, logging food. That's a very common one, right? We obviously, like, a lot of people don't want to have to deal with that. So, but my mistake was not having them monitor that in any regard, because we're only focused on the habits. But the reality is like you can include protein, you can add fiber, but like it doesn't guarantee that your other food sources are not calorically dense. And so like there were a handful of people that, I mean, if you're listening to this, like I apologize and I would love to course correct this with you. But like there were a handful of people that like ended up gaining weight because we didn't keep any eye on the measurables. And I was too soft as a coach to push them to be like, hey, like we do have to track something. We have to keep an eye on total calorie count because otherwise like this could go in the wrong direction, right? And so like we have to keep an eye on outcomes. We do have to look at the scale because if we're not looking at the scale, then like all of our progress, quote unquote, that we're trying to measure is just guessing and everything is just emotionally driven, emotional decisions, right? And so it's like, how do you have a client have a weight goal, have a designated outcome goal, like weight, waist measurement, body fat percentage, whatever, and be able to focus on the process every single day rather than the outcome. They're going to weigh themselves every day. They're going to track their food every day. They're going to get a mirror back to them of how they're doing based on those numbers. And still, how can we keep them focused on the win of the process that I showed up for the gym even when I didn't feel like it, or I tracked my food and logged everything and got as close as I could, even if I didn't hit my calories, right? That's honestly just where having a coach is so key because like it's a really thin tightrope to walk. And like you have to have a coach in your corner that understands both sides of that. So that's really like, how do we keep fitness from feeling like another thing on our plate? It's keeping the focus, the process oriented focus at the forefront most of the time. And for those who have a good coach in their corner, it's like the coach kind of, you can delegate the outcome to the coach. That's why I rehired my fitness coach as well. It's because like I really want the outcome goal of losing these 10 pounds. And it means so much more to me than a weight, but like that is the objective metric that needs to be met for me to like say, okay, I accomplished what I said I would accomplish. And like I am really good at being process focused, almost to the point of missing the outcome sometimes of like, oh, but I'm being consistent, so I should be proud, even if the scale's not moving. But like I hired a coach to make the hard calls to like cut the calories, increase the steps, add the cardio, whatever, when I'm not on track to hit that number, because like I will struggle to do that because I will get too process focused. So having a coach honestly is so key. It's so hard to be objective with yourself in those situations. And so that's how, like, in my opinion, really walking that tightrope and not getting burnt out. Because if I were to focus on just the outcome, then like I'd probably make hastier decisions, freak out if the scale's not going down, and just be more stressed in the process. But I'm genuinely so relaxed, like so relaxed, hit a new low weigh in today and we're killing it. So now the second piece of how to make sure that fitness does not become another thing on your plate, something that you dread, something that you feel like is always just an ad rather than something that gives back to you, is right in that integration and internalization of identity. Identity is who you are when things are hard, who you are when life is stressful. And this is where like you have to actually do the identity work in the day-to-day, not just like fill out a worksheet. Is like, who I am when life gets stressful is like, do I become the person that just shakes my wrist on the couch, which I have been that person. I've done that. And I've done it recently. Like I'll admit more recently than I would have liked to admit. I'm still human. And it doesn't mean that you don't have those moments, but like, what do you do most of the time? Right. And who I am when life is stressful is like, I force myself to carve out some time to go on a walk in the middle of my workday, because otherwise I know I'm just going to run on fumes. Right. Or who you are when life gets stressful when it comes to food. Do I let myself self-medicate with food, my feelings, right? For some people it's alcohol, for some people it's food. Do you let yourself do that? And like your identity is not what you say you are on the piece of paper, it's your actions, right? And so that's where it becomes a really tough mirror, where being process focused is not like the easy way out. Like it's literally looking at those behaviors of like, I drank alcohol when I was stressed, and that is my identity right now. That is the identity that I chose in that moment. And the one that I want to move towards does not do that. She does this instead. And that's the choice that I have to make next time. And so to make that clearer, we have standards. And standards are the rules that identity of you lives by. So, for example, a standard is something that makes it more measurable and clear exactly how to step into that identity. Because, like, identity in and of itself is a very like vague, esoteric term that you kind of like, oh, it sounds lofty, right? A standard is simply a rule that you live by. So, like for myself, it's I don't drink my calories. Like, I truly try to never drink my calories, whether it is alcohol, it is fruit juice, whatever. I do not want to drink calories. And that is me. That's my identity, my standards. It is not something that I require my clients to believe for themselves. They set their own, right? I have a client whose standard for alcohol is she does not drink on like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that. Like a couple days of the week is like an absolute hard no. And like she also set a cap of like 9 drinks a week. And like maybe to you that sounds like a lot, but for her that's actually a significant reduction. And so then she goes into every single week. She's like, I have this event, and this event, and I have 9 drinks to spread out, and I can't drink on these days. So here's how I'm going to plan this. And that gives her structure to then act in the identity of the version of herself that she wants to become, while also moderating calories, making it easier to hit her goals, right? So that's also a really big piece is like in order for this to not feel like arduous work, like there are certain things that you just have to decide that you are going to live by. And it's no longer a thought process. It's no longer every single time that I'm in this situation, I have to use willpower and decision fatigue to get through it, right? Because if you do that, you're always going to fall short because decision fatigue is real. We're tired and we're going to want to take the path of least resistance when the identity that we're aspiring towards is almost always the harder decision, right? And so when you make those rules, that's how you become that version of yourself. Simply I always pick up the trash when I walk by a piece of trash. I always pick it up. That's a part of who I am because like my values are that I care about the environment or litter or whatever, right? So think about like what is your identity? What are the values that the version of you that you're becoming prioritize? And what are the actual tangible standards, the rules that you live by that make it easier for you to not have to decide in those moments, right? So that's really like a big overview of how is it exactly that you stop burning out with your health and fitness journey. And I do want to give a client example as well. I have a client, I'll call her S, and she had a check-in like a couple months ago where she was like, I think I'm just going to quit. And I was like, where is this coming from? Because I had no signal of this other than just like life is stressful in the past couple of weeks up to that point. And like she would visibly hit her calories, her protein every single day. Her step graph looked like a straight freaking line, like 9,000 steps every single day, like within like 100 steps worth. So it was like a straight line. Always hit her workouts, like everything was always checked off. And then she goes, all of a sudden, I'm burnt out. I need to quit. This isn't for me. And so how we walked her back from that was I kind of like slowed her down and I was like, hey, like I have a hunch because like I know you struggle with perfectionism, like kind of being performative in a sense. And like, are these habits like steps, hitting your calories, your workouts, when you do them, do you feel recharged or drained? And I just asked her that. And she was like, honestly, drained. And I was like, that's the problem. Like, why are we doing this in the first place? Like, none of like you're doing it essentially for me, like to check in and get a good report card. And I called her out on that and she was like, oh my God, you're so right. And I was like, why would you do these things for you though? Like, why would these things actually benefit you in your life? And if they don't, just tell me, be honest. And she was like, no, actually, like this amount of steps, like if I'm like intentional about it, it's like I can get walks throughout the day. And I go on these walks, but I'm so focused on like getting the steps in that I'm not like relieving my stress. I was like, interesting. Drinking water, tracking your calories, same thing, right? Are we tracking our calories to hit the target or are we moderating ourselves in these moments because we don't want to feel overly full and stuffed? That feels gross, right? I want to actually feel good about myself when I wake up in the morning or when I go to bed. And so we really went through every single habit that she had. And we asked her, like, why are you doing these things for you? Not for me, not for the report card. And we actually, the surprising thing, I was ready to do this, but like we didn't have to scale anything back. We didn't actually have to change a single habit, a single target. It had everything to do with the mindset behind it and the intention behind it. And it was so ironic because when we set goals at the beginning of the year together, she was like, my goal is to get better at stress management. So we set all these things like meditate, walk, right? Go outside every day. And like she was literally meditating to check the box instead of to give herself peace. And so that's a reminder that like if fitness feels like another thing on your plate, like what are you doing it for? Why are you doing it? Are you letting it be a drain when it should be a charge? And these are some tips and some rules of thumb that can help you to get better at that moving forward. So I hope this podcast was insightful for you guys. I appreciate you listening so much. And let me know if you have any feedback or questions in my Instagram DMs. I'm always ready to chat. And I will see you back here in the next episode.